FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is May 15th, 2017. It's Monday. We're talking with John Rubino. And imagine you go into your office on Monday and you start your computer up, or it was running all weekend, and you get a message that says, we control your data. If you want access to it, send $10,000 worth of Bitcoins to the following public key. There's nothing that anybody can do for you. There's nothing that can be done. Hopefully, if you've got backups, especially offline backups, they might not be infected, but you never know. Well, it's happening all over the world right now. And the root who originated this program to take advantage of this exploit will shock you. But we'll let John Rubino talk about that. Good morning, John.
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, eventful weekend. What happened was the U.S. government, via the NSA and the CIA, created some hacking tools that were obviously really good, and they left them on their computer systems, thinking that they'd be safe there. But somebody, of course,
what could go wrong?
That and a lot of other stuff. And so those high-powered military-grade hacking tools became part of the cyber ecosystem. You know, they're just out there in the wild now. And this weekend, somebody weaponized them, sent them out as worms, and they invaded hundreds of thousands of computers and encrypted the data on the computer, and then demanded, as you said, some Bitcoins before they would send a decryption key to allow people to get back into their computers. And a lot of these things were, hospital systems or media company systems where you can't really be down because it's dangerous in one way or another. So you got to pay up, or you just, your ATM machines don't work if you're a bank or whatever. So serious stuff happens and is still happening around the world. But then somebody figured out that the malware had a kill switch, and that it was programmed to look up a given website with a really long, obscure name. And if it found that website online, then it would shut down. So the hero who figured this out went out, registered that website, and set it up so you can find it online. And so the malware then just shut down. So they've stopped the infection for now. But you would think that, first of all, there's a lot of other tools out there, a lot of other hacking tools that came with the big NSA, CIA data trove that WikiLeaks made public a while ago. And also that hackers will be able to adapt the existing worm that was stopped to let it bypass that kill switch. Either they just take it out of the code or they do something else with it, whatever. And so this is just the beginning. Stuff like this is going to happen going forward as these tools get utilized by hackers. Now, you would think that would spook the financial markets, right? That all of a sudden your brokerage account isn't safe anymore because the broker might be hit with a ransomware attack that shuts it down, whatever, stuff like that. And you would think that at least the U.S. markets would open down, since, we're kind of the cause of the problem, and we haven't been a target yet, but we could be soon. But no, stocks are up, and that's sort of par for the course. Oh, and also this weekend, North Korea launched a missile that is nuclear capable and apparently can reach Japan and further out than that. And that didn't spook anybody either. U.S. stocks are up pretty big. Of course, gold and silver are also up. So you got kind of risk on and risk off happening at the same time here. I don't know what that means. I think the financial markets now are at the point where they assume that bad news is good news because it's going to lead governments to produce even more money that will have to go into some aspect of the financial markets. So buy the riskiest financial assets that you can find because the governments are going to subsidize them going forward. Now, this is crazy, obviously, Kerry. It's something that's completely unsustainable, and it'll blow up in our faces pretty soon. But right now, the financial markets are riding that wave. They're riding this Fed liquefaction of the whole world thing as far as it'll take them.
Yeah, they don't seem to be fazed by anything, these markets. They just keep going up and up and up. I mean, how does that work?
Well, it's the nature of bubbles. They do that, and rational people look at them and go, "How can they be doing this? It makes no sense." Could we be wrong? Could our analysis of stock valuations or interest rates relative to this or that could that be wrong? Could history not matter anymore? And the fact that you're questioning what have been pretty ironclad relationships since the beginning of financial markets means that we're towards the end of the process, right? Yeah. Because that you maintain your certainty up until the point where certainty seems kind of crazy, and then when you hit that point, that's usually a sign. Again, historically, if history means anything, that when you start questioning your premises because the market is behaving so irrationally, that's when it cracks. And I'm not predicting a collapse in the stock market anytime soon because it should have collapsed 5 years ago, but we are at the point where historically bubbles have blown up. And this is the biggest bubble ever. This is the most widespread worldwide bubble that has ever existed, encompassing the broadest array of financial and non-financial assets. There's never been anything like this. And there's never been one that lasted this long before. So when it blows up, Carrie, my God, it's probably going to be commensurately crazy on the downside. But the timing is impossible to predict.
Yes, of course. You never know the timing because the future is uncertain, as Keynes said, right?
Yeah. There are times when it seems certain, but this is not one of them. Another interesting aspect of the malware attack is Bitcoin, because that's the currency that the hackers are asking for. And Bitcoin has had a huge run. It's gone from below 1,000 up to 1,800 just lately in a really pretty arc. And now it's back down to 1,700, but still it's way up. And so the question going forward for Bitcoin is this a good thing or bad thing, what's happening now? Because on the one hand, it's easy to picture a lot of vulnerable companies stockpiling Bitcoins so that they can pay the ransomware immediately when it hits, and so they don't have to go out and call people up and go, how do I buy Bitcoins? My hospital is down. People are dying, and they'll have the Bitcoins on hand. Yeah. And just be able to pay them off. That's bullish for Bitcoin, obviously, right? If everybody needs a trove of Bitcoins in order to pay off hackers, just in case, then there really aren't enough Bitcoins out there to satisfy that demand at today's prices, and it'll soar. On the other hand, if Bitcoin comes to be seen as the tool of cyber criminals, then you're going to expect it to be attacked by governments, right? Somebody's going to try to discredit Bitcoin so that it isn't such an attractive vehicle for ransomware and other kinds of cyber crimes. So it could be that the NSA or whoever will finally try to hack the blockchain or take down the big online Bitcoin wallets or something like that. So the exchanges break down and then people are spooked and they don't want Bitcoin anymore because they don't know if they can get it back. And so this is kind of an interesting time for Bitcoin where we're finding out how it evolves in a world where it's got several different functions, some of them good, some of them bad. And it isn't clear how governments are going to respond to this mix of characteristics for this new currency that just sprung up in the ecosystem. So we'll see. Again, another kind of uncertainty going forward. And theoretically fascinating process to watch, kind of sort of from a safe distance, I think.
Yeah. Well, you can't have too many Bitcoins, I guess. You got to get a wallet now. Get those Bitcoins, because if your computer is locked up and it's the only computer you have, you might have a problem buying those Bitcoins, John.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the catch-22, isn't it? Someone locks up your computer and says, send us Bitcoin to unlock it, but you need your computer to buy Bitcoins. So what do you do? I have no idea. If somebody does that to my computer, I think I'll just throw it out in the trash and buy a new computer and start over, Yeah. And just wipe the data slate clean, Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to get rid of your paper trail.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, when your computer slows down, you have a choice at that point. It might be a couple of years old. You can wipe it clean and then reinstall everything. Or you just take your backup, you dump your computer, and you just get a new one and start over again. Because I'm convinced every computer has an algorithm in it, and every day that you own it, it slows down the clock. The computer gets slower, and it's doing something deliberately to slow down your computer to make it so that in a year and a half, it'll be so slow that you absolutely have to buy another one, or you can just forget about it. It takes forever to do everything.
That's completely believable. I mean, planned obsolescence is a basic characteristic of most stuff that's made today. And, computers are already getting obsolete the minute you buy them because the new ones get faster and faster. But it wouldn't be at all a surprise to see Intel or Microsoft or somebody do something like slow the clock down. Yeah. On a pre-programmed schedule, so that after a couple of years, it's just it's a doorstop,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think it's about here.
Gary, we can't trust anybody. And that's why gold and silver, all roads lead to gold and silver on this show, because that's the one thing that they can't really mess with in the long run. They can manipulate it in the short run, and they do via futures contracts. But in the long run, gold and silver have survived as stores of value through inflation and deflation and revolution and regime change and major war and minor war. Anything you can think of that disrupts financial markets, gold and silver have stayed valuable through that whole time. Yeah. So the people who are stackers now, who are buying gradually greater amounts of gold and silver over time, are probably going to be okay going forward. And you can't say that about almost anybody else, because we don't know what's going to happen with blue chip equities or growth stocks or Bitcoin for that matter. We just can't know going forward because there's a lot of history that says a lot of different things in the case of equities. And with Bitcoin, there's virtually no history saying anything, so we have no idea. So you definitely need some gold and silver. And you should be accumulating it as it's repressed or suppressed by the paper players out there, because basically what they're doing is giving you an ongoing buying opportunity. And China and India get this. When the price of gold and silver go down, they buy more. So they're not spooked by the squiggles in the market. They react as long-term buyers to a sale. If the thing you're going to be buying for the next 20 or 30 years goes down in price, you buy more now, and so you can buy less later when it goes back up. And that's probably the rational approach to a real asset that you're counting on as the core risk-free part of your portfolio. That's basically what monetary gold is. It's the risk-free part of your monetary assets. So China and India get this, and Russia also gets this. Yeah. And individuals in the U.S. would do well to emulate them, I think.
Perhaps. I think it's probably a good idea. So what's happening here with the government? What's been going on here? Where are we at now with this whole cycle?
With the U.S. government?
Yeah.
Chaos. It's the latest just this week was that Trump is disillusioned with his cabinet and his aides, and he's getting ready to clean house. He's going to fire a bunch of these guys and replace them with other people who we don't know yet. And the first to fall was the head of the FBI that was fired last week. Mm-hmm. And that's still being investigated, the reasons for it, and whether it was in response to an accelerating investigation of the whole Russia election hacking thing or what. We don't know the details of any of it. But if that's the beginning of a cabinet and staff shakeup at the White House, then we won't know anything about U.S. policy going forward on pretty much anything for a long time. And the stock market will probably go up because it apparently loves that kind of uncertainty.
Yeah.
The more uncertain it is, the more you need to own Google and Amazon, apparently.
Well, everything in the stock market happens for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. There was a time when the stock market was actually a force for good in the world. I think those days have ended, though, Kerry. Now it's a public policy tool. We, at the U.S. government level, use the stock market as a mechanism for changing people's behavior. In other words, we push up stock prices in order to get people to spend money, which then increases the amount of economic activity out there, which brings in tax revenue for the government and gets incumbent politicians elected. And that's now the role of the stock market in the eyes of the government. It's a way to get yourself elected 2 years from now. So when you start messing with what used to be an important price signaling mechanism, you buy yourself trouble in the future again, So no matter what trend you look at now, whether it's asset prices or government manipulation of asset prices or geopolitics or rising debt levels or, the environment, et cetera, you see disturbing trends that are leading to some kind of a crisis. And that probably should have already led to that crisis. That we're still standing after the amount of debt that we've taken on in the last couple of decades is astounding.
Yeah.
That financial assets are still valuable after they've been inflated the way they've been inflated is amazing, and that there haven't been more peasants with pitchforks out there in every election, kicking out the incumbents and replacing them with, Marine Le Pen, Donald Trump type politicians is also amazing. That this stuff hasn't blown up yet is really a surprise. But that doesn't mean it won't blow up. It just means that a system that's global with a whole bunch of central banks able to create currency at will and use it to manipulate their little segment of the world, that's a really resilient system that can go on for a long time with incredibly dysfunctional policies before it finally blows up. But it will blow up.
Yes.
We're creating the conditions for something that dwarfs the 2008-2009 crisis, and someday it'll hit.
Yeah, someday.
And we haven't even talked about real estate.
Yeah.
There are housing bubbles out there all of a sudden again.
These bubbles are different. Well, look, a lot of it isn't different because even if the people's income assets have been verified and all that, which they do now, they kind of went back to traditional mortgages. Still, FHA, you put down 4% or 3% of the property's value. So even though the owners, or I should say the borrowers, you're not really an owner till you get back the note from the bank after you made your last payment. Otherwise, you're just taking care of it for the bank, let's face it. But even if you're an owner and you're creditworthy, you still have so little skin in the game that if there's any kind of a decline or credit crunch or whatever, and things start really hitting the fan, you're going to have people walking away, strategic defaults. That's what we've had. That's what we had last time, and that's what you'll have this time, because you can't sell property and allow people to borrow 96% of the value. They got to have. That's why the 20% mortgage was around for so long, because it was effective. 20% was enough so that you had skin in the game and you didn't want to walk away, right?
Absolutely. A house is a big long-term purchase, and there's no way to guarantee what's going to happen to your finances over the course of 30 years. So you need a big down payment from the point of view of the lender, right? If you're lending money to somebody, you have no idea what's going to happen to them over the next 30 years. So you want a big cushion up front. So that was the formerly rational way to run a housing market. But then the government, of course, got involved and decided that once again, they wanted to manipulate people's behavior in order to get themselves elected. And they decided that home ownership was a really important public policy goal. And they decided to make it easier for people over time to buy houses by, as you said, lowering the amount of money that you need to put down up front, or by pushing down interest rates aggressively to unrealistically low levels, which lowers the cost of your house on a monthly basis. Your payments go down if you can borrow at a really low interest rate. And so what they ended up doing was getting people into houses who didn't really belong in houses yet. If you can't come up with a decent down payment, you shouldn't be taking out a 30-year loan on a big asset that actually doesn't appreciate, that actually depreciates when you include all the maintenance that you got to put into it. Most houses in most markets, even lately, have not been good investments when you look at upkeep. When you include the fact that that new roof is going to cost you $25,000, and then when the heat pump breaks, that's another $5,000. That's an ongoing thing with the house. And it doesn't end. It's always something new coming at you when you got a house, and more so as the house ages. So if you give somebody a house with a big loan and they didn't have to put anything down, and the house starts costing them more than it's making them, like you said, it's easy to walk away.
Yeah.
And we've created the conditions in which that's going to happen again. All these people borrowing with really low down payments have no incentive to stick around when the house drops in value by 30%. If you've got 10% equity in a house and it drops by 30%, better just to walk away from it than to pay off that loan, which is more than the house is worth at this moment.
Yeah.
So we'll see that again. That it used to be the where they would just mail the keys back.
Jingle. That's called jingle mail.
2009, 2010.
Jingle mail. That's what they're doing with shopping centers now.
Yes, yeah.
With malls, jingle mail for malls.
Yeah, the mall becomes the bank's problem. And then the banks get to figure out what to do with these big, giant, empty buildings. And the same thing will happen with houses again.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that governments are increasingly desperate to figure out how to keep this thing going, because the expansion has been going on a long time. Consumer debt is already back to record levels. Government debt is far beyond former record levels. So everybody's leveraged to the hilt. Corporations in the last couple of years borrowed more money than any couple of years in the past. And so they're at record levels of debt. So everybody's over leveraged. And when that happens, when we reach that point where the economy can't grow through regular borrowing channels because everybody's borrowed to the hilt, they figure out a way to make houses easier to get. And so that's what they're doing now.
Well,
and what they will continue to do until it blows up.
So there's an interesting thing I was reading from my good friend and sponsor, Jason Hartman. What's happened, all these companies or retailers are going out of business. And one of the reasons why they're going out of business is because private equity firms are buying them. And then they're splitting the retail operations from the real estate. And then they're upping the rental that they charge the retail. And at the same time, you have retail imploding. So they can't afford the rent. The real estate, though, because it's getting inflated rentals, has an inflated value. And then they can borrow on that. They can securitize it, whatever they want to do. And this is why these companies are dying much sooner than they would ordinarily need to, because the private equity hedge funds are manipulating it and slicing them and tranching them effectively. And as a result, it's like, hey, Sears, Kmart can't afford their rent payments, got to go bankrupt. And then they get rid of the debt from that operation, but they own the real estate. I mean, it's downright devious and pernicious, but that's what they're doing.
Carry it. At least they're not paying themselves huge fees for all this, right? Because that would be really crazy.
I'm sure they're doing that too. I'm sure they're doing it too.
The private equity guys, they pay themselves huge management fees, which is basically a way of sucking money out of the company as they're dismantling it, destroying the value of the assets. It's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
But retailing, bricks and mortar retailing in the U.S. was going to implode all along, one way or another, because we overbuilt into a technologically changing market. We have more square footage of retail space per person than anybody else in the world, vastly more than Europe does, for instance. So we were overbuilt to begin with, without seeming to understand what e-commerce was going to do to bricks and mortar retailing. These guys who were adding stores, like JCPenney and Macy's, the last time they were adding stores, they were doing so really unwisely. And now they're having to close hundreds of stores, soon to be thousands of stores, as they shrivel up and die, because the technology environment has passed them by. Now most people buy stuff online, and the stuff that you can buy online is expanding. Used to be that you had to go try on clothes, right? That's what kept Macy's and JCPenney and the other big department stores going for a long time, was that you couldn't really buy clothes online. Well, now people are figuring out how to do it. They find something that fits them, and they order 3 more of them on Amazon or wherever. And so that's that. So Macy's got to sell one thing, one suit jacket or whatever.
Right.
And one dress of a certain style and a certain make. And the other 3 that somebody might want to own because they like that thing, you get for 30% less on Amazon or one of Amazon's affiliates. And so JCPenney doesn't do any more, follow-up sales or anything. And so they're dying.
Yeah.
And that's a trend that's going to continue. I don't know how it is where you are, Carrie, but there are strip malls all over the place here, and half the buildings or half the storefronts say for lease on them now, because people are just closing up shop. And so it's not clear what these things are worth going forward, these strip malls.
Florida is kind of the exception to the rule because it's a retirement-based economy. So a lot of these people are older, and when you're older, you don't necessarily want to go online. I was talking to my brother-in-law, who's a number of years, over 10 years older than me. And he's like, I like to go to the store and see my merchandise and feel it in my hands. I was like, like thinking you're just so square.
That's a transitional thing too, though, because I'm sure your brother-in-law is a healthy guy who'll be around for a long time. But most people in their 70s aren't going to be shopping that much longer, and they're going to be replaced by millennials who buy everything online. So this is a rolling transition, which will leave a lot of empty buildings out there. So a lot of commercial real estate has negative value right now because it's not even worth the upkeep and the taxes. So and I think in the long run, it's a good thing because, some of that land can go back to nature maybe. We can let some trees grow there instead of these big asphalt parking lots that are emptying out as we speak.
One place I saw was converting an old Walmart to a refugee processing center. So maybe that's the way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, charter schools, Tesla dealerships, refugee housing. So there are uses for those buildings, but probably not on the same scale as Walmart, JCPenney, these big 40,000 square foot stores aren't going to be replaced by new big box concepts. They're just going to go away.
No, I wouldn't use Tesla as the example because I think that company talk about bubbles. That's the most bubblicious company on the street now. It's worth more than like all its competitor companies put together in the auto industry, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I love the concept of Tesla, and the stuff they're building, the stuff they make will dominate the world someday, but it might not be them making them, right?
Almost certainly won't be them making it. Almost certainly. But he's got great ideas.
That's how bleeding edge technology works. It's a great idea. It's going to change the world, but the early producers of it frequently aren't the ones who become the Apples and the Intels of the world. There's somebody else that has to kind of blaze the trail, find out what doesn't work, go out of business, and then show everybody else how to go forward. So Tesla might be that. But for now, their stuff conceptually is really exciting. And I think electric cars will be huge. That's a growth market forever, although it won't supplant internal combustion engines
for quite a
anytime
while
soon. It's just going to be a 30% compounded growth story for 20 years, which is a great investment idea. If you find the company that actually rides that thing all the way, rides that trend.
Yeah.
And solar power is getting cheaper all the time. So it's going to grow as it gets cheaper. And those new roof concepts that Tesla is bringing out are gorgeous. They're really pretty.
Yeah, that I'm a lot more enthusiastic over than his cars. The car is like, the batteries are cool. It's a cool car on certain levels, but it's not like a standard car that really has to get put through the ringer to actually prove itself. This car, we'll just upgrade it. We'll just upgrade the software next week. Don't worry about it. Just release it. And I think the car is inferior in a lot of ways to other cars that are in the segment. Really. I mean, if you want a car that's a supercar, then okay, you're going to have uncomfortable seats. It's going to be noisy on the highway and not a real comfortable experience. But the Tesla is supposed to be more than that. So they are messed up in their niche. It's not a big niche. We'll see what happens when they come out with the electric car for the masses, John.
Yeah, batteries will get better year after year. And that'll open up the lower end of the market, right? The mass market for electric cars. So when you got them selling for $20,000 a piece, and there's a lot of charging stations out there and stuff, then it's a big market. But it's not clear, obviously, who ends up supplying that demand and when it happens. It might be 5 years from now. It might be 20 years from now. There's just no way to know how fast batteries get better, but they are getting better.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, the handwriting here is on the wall that electric is going to be more and more important. But look, if we've got 150 million cars on the road here, John, and we sell 17 million a year, that's 10 years to roll over the rolling stock in the U.S. And it's estimated that by 2030, at most, the market for electrics will be 30%, but probably somewhere between 15 to 30%. So we're looking at a multi-decade trend here. It's not going to just happen today,
Right. But for an investor, that's perfect, though, because you want something that grows at a nice steady, high rate for as far as the eye can see. And if electric cars are only up to 30% of the market in 20 years, that means you still got a lot of room to run. And so investors will pay infinite amounts for those stocks. So if you pick the right stocks, you've got the .coms of your generation.
But it's just going to be a replacement market where they're selling cars to replace the existing cars that are out there. This is a whole long trend. I mean, it's so long, it's going to be well past our lives, unless we live for 100.
But long trends are good. You don't want something that explodes and takes over in 2 or 3 years and then plateaus, because that's a really hard thing to invest in. But if the demand is growing at 20 or 30%, remember, with both solar power and electric cars, we're starting from a base that's really close to zero, 0% of the market. Yeah. And so you can generate nice double-digit gains forever with something that's going from 0 to 100% somewhere out there.
My only point is it ain't happening overnight. Anyway, that's it for this week. So find John's work over at dollarcollapse.com, us at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for our newsletters. Any questions, comments on this interview or any others we've done, send us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com, and the Twitter feed's at Kerry Lutz. The Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. John, we will catch up with you next week.
Okay, Kerry. Talk to you then.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.